Welcome to Correct Food Systems Corona interview with Gary Kennedy.
COVID-19 talk.
Myself. Okay, so the purpose of today is to provide some information to our clients and the food industry on coronavirus and what else is on people's minds at the moment. So, Gary, let's just start off by saying, can you provide some general background on this virus and what us foodies need to know about the growth, the transmission, and how that may affect our production lines, our production and our businesses and our kitchens for our clients? Just a rough overview.
Well, coronavirus is a virus, which makes it different to a bacteria. In many ways, it's not dissimilar to other food-borne viruses in the way we treat them. So we have to deal in the food industry with norovirus and with hepatitis and a number of other food-borne viruses. And really the ways we control this in many ways are very similar. Some of the ways we cook food, some of the ways we sanitize our facilities, our personal hygiene procedures, what we do about letting people in and out of our facility are exactly the same for this bug as they are for a lot of the others. What makes COVID-19, the coronavirus, different to most other organisms that we deal with in the food industry is when we typically deal with microbiological issues, we're either dealing with food safety issues and we're dealing with food pathogens. So we'd be talking about vomiting and diarrhea from E. coli, salmonella, hepatitis.
And that's the bacteria causing the toxin or the poison in the food that makes the stomach reject that.
Or it grows inside us,
Yep.
and we get it. Similarly, we may also be dealing with food spoilage organisms. We'd be dealing with things that make the food go off, that make it go sour, that make it go rot, that make it puff up. What's different here is we're actually not dealing with a microorganism that does anything to the food. It doesn't grow in the food, it doesn't produce a poison in the food, and in fact, if we eat it and it goes through our stomach, the acid in our stomach will kill it fairly easily. And if it does manage to make its way through the stomach, we'll poo it out the other end, because it doesn't cause gastrointestinal problems. Despite what people think by buying huge amounts of toilet paper, it doesn't do that. This is a respiratory problem. So in that sense, it's like cold and flu or like pneumonia.
So it will affect, as we know, people's ability to breathe rather than make them ill with gastro.
Yeah, we're not talking something that's gastroenteritis, we're really talking breathing difficulties. We're talking effectively respiratory disease of the lungs more than anything else.
Okay, so we've all heard the frightening statistics. Even if we've heard flatten the curve, it's likely that someone eventually in our workplace will have this infection.
Guaranteed someone in our workplace will have this.
So obviously, what do food businesses need to know about what actions to take, given that over time it will appear in our workplace with someone that we know, for those businesses that are still working and remaining open?
It's going to occur. The government in Australia is saying at least 20% of people will get this bug. I know in some countries, Angela Merkel in Germany has said 80% of Germans can expect to get this. We're going to get to the stage where, unless you're a sole trader or a micro business, you're going to have to deal with people in your business who are dealing with this. So even, when you're dealing with a large organisation, so say we were dealing with a big huge company who has a huge factory like a Kellogg's or a Nestle or a Coca-Cola, they are definitely going to run across this. But when you're talking smaller, your cafes, your restaurants, your school canteen, your petrol station,
small manufacturers, your small goods people,
your corner shops, all of those are going to run across people who have this
Okay,
in their
so
staff.
what do they need to do then in terms of food safety protocols to manage this?
The reality is they should do nothing different to what they do now. The food industry should be one of the few industries, probably the medical industry and the food industry should be the two who should already have all the controls in place. Because really, to control this bug, you should not come to work if you're sick.
Yep.
If you feel sick, you should tell your manager and you should leave work, and then
Yep.
your manager should take appropriate action. That's
Yep.
already in the Food Standards
Yep.
Code. You should wash and sanitize your hands regularly in warm, soapy water, or
Yes.
use another method of sanitizing, which alcohol gel is one.
That's there.
And that's in the Food
Yep.
Standards Code. It actually says in the Food Standards Code you must not do anything to contaminate food, and it specifically mentions sneezing and coughing. The
What
reality...
about cleaning the surfaces that it can fall onto?
Well, the Food Standards Code said all surfaces
Cleanliness.
must be clean and they must not contaminate food
Okay.
or food contact utensils. So, in that sense, everything that we have to do for coronavirus should be exactly the same that we do for norovirus or salmonella or E. coli. It's exactly the same procedures in terms of ensuring that people who consume the food don't get sick.
I would imagine that most businesses would want to ensure that those controls are very much in place, given the heightened risk and given some of the detailed information that we know about it. But before we get on to that, I want to talk about the health of food handlers, because as Scott Morrison keeps on saying, this is a health crisis. The health of food handlers in food businesses is critical. So what do businesses need to do and manage and know about managing their staff?
Well, I suppose the first few things, especially when people are trying to hang on to their jobs because they're suddenly the only breadwinner, and people will potentially have no sick leave because of the current situation where people are being reduced hours. I'm hoping the temptation is not to work when you're sick, but the reality is this bug, this coronavirus, COVID-19, is unusual in that it appears that there's a period before you realise you're sick that you actually are contagious. And in that sense, hepatitis is another food poisoning virus that has a similar problem. Before you realise you're sick, you are sick. So there is the possibility, again in the Food Standards Code, if you know you are sick, to report that you're sick. One of the hassles at the moment is if someone in a workplace tests present for COVID-19, the whole of the workplace is meant to go home. And we've already seen that in catering establishments in New South Wales. That's going to be difficult in a few months' time when half the workplace, and it will get up to 50% in some places or more, where half the workplace is testing positive for this.
So what you're saying is businesses and managers need to again reinforce the government message of do not go to work if you are sick.
Yes.
Even though you are essential, do not go to work if you are sick, because you will not only affect the food and the surfaces, but more importantly, you will affect the health of your fellow co-workers.
Yes, and not only
the health of the business if we have to shut down.
Not only will you be ill, everyone in the workplace will be ill, and the entire factory/restaurant/petrol station will have to shut down, or the organisation will have to send everyone home, completely decontaminate the place, and then bring in a totally new crew.
So what we really need is that look after your family approach that's been talked about. Is if you value your family, you won't expose them and you'll do the right thing, and that's what managers in the businesses need to...
That same philosophy applies to the workplace.
That you are very valuable to us. Please don't come to work if you are sick. Please, if you've got any concerns, let us know, because we want to take care of you all.
Your way to think, which is, I suppose, a little bit cynical, is to think round the other way. How would you feel if someone came to work sick and you lost your job
Yes.
because someone else came in who was sick?
Yes, okay. Okay, so we've all also heard about hand washing being a critical tool, and we're all being told to wash our hands. What do us food handlers need to know about hand washing at this time?
Basically to do it. I suppose a couple of things there. I suppose there are two common ways being espoused to wash your hands in the media at the moment. The general public think it's alcohol sanitizing gels, and to some extent they're not the best way to do it. Actually, soap and warm water is the best way to do it. Soap
and every business needs to have that by law.
By law,
by
you
the
need
food standards
soap
code
and warm running water.
and soap and an ability to dry your hands on a paper towel.
Yeah. Soap does two things. The first thing is your skin produces oil and grease, and the soap and a lot of the viruses and bacteria stick to that grease, which is why they're on your skin. So the first thing the soap does is to break down that grease, and so it literally, in washing your hands,
it off.
Yeah, a lot of those just disappear.
Yeah.
So you reduce the number of microorganisms because they're not there anymore. They've gone with the grease when you washed your hands. The second thing that soap does is soap is a surfactant. So if you think that the membranes around viruses are made of protein, fats and carbohydrates, like a steak is, and all things are made of protein, fats and carbohydrates, soap dissolves fats. So on the membrane of the virus we have protein, fat and carbohydrate. The soap dissolves the fat, which means the membrane on the outside becomes weak and it breaks open. Effectively it dies.
So it's like it breaks open the skin.
Yes.
Of the...
Breaks open the skin and the thing can't survive. Now, alcohol, as in alcohol sanitizing gels, have the second effect as well. Similarly, alcohol will remove the fat and cause them to break over. But alcohol generally is not as good as removing the grease off your skin.
Yes, I've noticed that people are saying, really, soap and water. Don't worry about the sanitizer gel that's sold out. Soap and water.
And we're not talking expensive soap either. We're talking your common pump pack industrial.
Palmolive.
Yeah, or the hand washing soap dispensers you have in your food business are perfectly good to do this.
What's the correct method? Because if we're relying on soap to slough off COVID-19 on our hands that we're going to pick up and damage the organism so it can't grow and exist on our hands, what's the correct method to wash our hands?
It is that 20 seconds sing happy birthday to you method. When I've described to people, I say you need to think about when you've watched MASH or ER or a show like that and you've seen the doctors
George
go in.
Clooney.
Yeah, go in and scrub before they go into hospital, where, they go down to the wrist and you see them not just do that, they're doing between the fingers, they're doing the backs of the fingers, they're doing under the cuticles, down on that. They certainly wouldn't have a watch on or a ring. They need to come off.
So when we go into client businesses, we do often see people wash their hands, in a cursory way. One thing that businesses could do is really ramp up the thoroughness and technique of hand washing, and that will help food handlers at work, but it will also help them remain healthy and safe in their own home if they're doing that.
Yes.
And encourage their... Now, we've posted some resources with our newsletter on how to do that. There's
that video, that
a black paint on gloves, and I've also posted you can make up a sign according to the lyrics of your favourite song, so feel free to use some of those signage and get that up. Now, if you have people in with different languages, there are plenty of hand washing signs in different languages that you should print up and you should be reviewing and, most importantly, modelling. If you're the manager of a business, you should be modelling that really thorough hand washing technique.
Food industry personnel also have a job to do here because, like clinicians, they're the people who should know how to wash their hands properly, and they should be going home teaching their family how they wash them in the factory.
Right. And what about disposable gloves?
I suppose what we say about disposable gloves, like we always say about disposable gloves are good just to keep stuff getting on your hands. But you sneeze on the disposable glove, it's on the disposable glove. It doesn't do much for what you're touching.
And sometimes it can give a false sense of security. I'm wearing a glove.
Oh yeah, I'm wearing a glove, I can scratch my head, I can sneeze, I can touch.
Gives glove immunity.
Yeah,
So
some people get the misimpression that when they've got gloves on, their hands are sterile. They're not.
okay, so given that the virus is highly contagious, can someone get coronavirus from eating food?
No, there is no evidence of coronavirus being caught by eating food, or for that matter, or for drinking either. So
Okay.
food and drink. And in that, it's not just the food. There's no evidence you can get it from a knife, a fork, a spoon, a glass,
I
a
was going
plate
to say,
either.
I've got a list here. Stainless steel benches.
No, unless someone sneezes on a bench and then you want to lick it straight afterwards. The bug it needs to get into your lungs. And to do that, it needs to get basically either directly into your lungs by inhaling air, or it needs to get into your mouth or nose or through your eyes.
So we've been told not to touch our faces.
Yeah, don't touch your face. So if someone sneezes on a stainless steel bench and then you put your hands on that and then put it in your mouth, yes, transmission
same
is theoretically possible.
Of knife handles,
Similar again.
tap handles.
Similar again.
Can it survive on the packages of food that we send out or packages of food that we're getting in?
Again, there is no evidence that anyone has ever, and we should say not just with coronavirus, there's no evidence that anyone has ever got sick from the outside of a packet or a can ever from any food poisoning bug. Look, there are some studies out there, and they do vary according to the scientific studies you see, but usually most people are saying it's 3 days in plastic or 3 days on stainless steel, less on rubber, 3 to 4 days on wood. So certainly if someone sneezes on something, it's viable for a period of time.
So if the transmission is really from people and people breathing and sneezing, it would be useful to do a deep clean and a thorough clean of all of those surfaces.
You're far, far more likely to come across this from a sneeze than you are from the side of a cup or by putting your hand on a bench. Because your problem is when you're sneezing, it's aerosoled, it's up in the air, and you'll breathe in that air.
So what about people's uniforms and wearing clothes from home into work?
Ideally, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be changing at work.
And changing your work clothes when you get home?
Yes.
Yes.
Or changing from your uniform into your work clothes before you leave the food premise.
What about hair? What about hair nets and touching hair?
There hasn't been any evidence to suggest that that's a hassle. Most people in food industry wear hair nets, but there's no evidence that actually happens.
What about on cleaning equipment and mops and brooms?
Again, like every other bug, when we're dealing with Salmonella, E. coli, they survive on mops and buckets. It would be there.
But it's got to get from there
it's
onto
got to get
our
off.
hands.
It's got to get off the mop in your mouth, and so
these are key.
Yes, and this is the key. The nose is the key. It's really got to get through your mouth or your nose down into your lungs.
Okay. There's been some discussion about, or some questions about keep cups. Now that a lot of businesses have gone to takeaway, should businesses be using keep cups?
We should say that in Australian legislation, you do not have to accept a returnable container. So you say, for example, you're a barista and someone hands you over a manky keep cup, you can tell them you don't want to fill it. There's no legal obligation. Ignoring that, if you do have a keep cup, remember it has to come off your hands into your mouth. So if you're the barista and there is COVID on the outside of a keep cup, when you hand it back to them,
It's on your hands.
It's on your hands. You either sanitize your hands or you don't put your hands up to your face.
Yes, okay, so we're really getting this strong message that hand washing is really important, as is the health of food handlers. Okay, so if it can exist on surfaces but not grow on surfaces, and it can exist on food but doesn't grow in the food, it needs these to put it into someone's system. What about cleaning and sanitising? Do we have to use a detergent to clean?
You should be using your normal cleaning and sanitising methods that you use. You shouldn't have to change. The things that get rid of the normal viruses and bacteria that we find in the food industry, this is no different. This is actually a relatively easy bug to kill and get rid of compared to some of the other bugs that we normally do.
So all of the sanitisers on the market supplied by your approved supplier and your chemical provider?
Not necessarily.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
There are some that work. There is, for example,